Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Saturday, February 19th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 56 days. The game against Michigan in 280 days. I forgot about Notre Dame, but they're in 196 days. We'll get there eventually. Last week, we did a show about the stories behind the recruitments of some of the biggest names on offense for the Buckeyes 2022 recruiting class. Today, we're going to turn our attention to the defense. My guest is Buckeye Scoop's Alex Gleitman. He writes an in-depth and behind-the-scenes look at the class after signing day every single year, and it's always one of the most popular pieces all year long. So, Alex, thanks for joining me.
Of course, always a pleasure. Ready to dive into this.
Yeah, and there is a lot to dive into. We're going to cover between a third and a quarter or so of the stuff that Alex wrote about, and there is a lot. So you can find the whole piece on the Ask the Insiders board at BuckeyeScoop.com. I will link that post in the post for this podcast, so you can get the whole inside scoop on the Ask the Insiders board. But let's start with the defensive line. With one of the more unpredictable recruitments there, Amari Abor. It seemed like the answer on him changed several times throughout this whole process.
Yeah, I would say in the spring and early summer, I felt pretty confident he was going to end up at Ohio State. And then you're kind of waiting, is commitment going to come? Is it going to come? It didn't come. You started hearing about Alabama and Oklahoma and Texas A&M and LSU. And I think people at Ohio State, they never felt, I think at one point there was rumors maybe on another site or just Twitter rumors that Ohio State was out of it and he was going to end up in the South. Ohio State people never felt like they were out of it, but they definitely were concerned or had less confidence as to where they were maybe in early June or so, whenever the official visit was in June, when I think they felt pretty good about where things were. And then you get into the fall and some other classes start filling up and things like that, and picture starts to become a little bit more clear. Ohio State, Oklahoma, maybe Alabama, maybe Texas A&M, but I think really where I start to feel really good about Ohio State's chances was when Amari came for the Penn State game on October 30th on his own dime, bonded with a lot of the recruits, spent time with some of the players, spent more time with the coaches. Obviously, that was a great game to go to as a recruit. Great night game atmosphere, things like that. And so I felt pretty good after that. I think Ohio State felt pretty good. And, we had been hearing that Texas A&M probably wasn't going to have room, and it makes sense based on who they ended up with in their defensive line class, maybe the best of all time at that position. And it's certainly, Alabama, kind of the same deal there, which obviously always makes sense with the Nick Saban team. And so it was really Ohio State or Oklahoma. I think Amari preferred Ohio State. Again, wasn't even sure if Oklahoma even had room at that point. And not that programs, Texas certainly started to emerge in this and things like that. But I think Ohio State was just a constant throughout the whole time. And, Amari didn't sign in December. He did commit to Ohio State at the All-American game, Under Armour All-American game. But then they had to kind of sweat it out all the way till February. And there was rumors he's going to visit Miami. He's going to visit Texas. I was a little nervous about Texas. But in speaking to Ohio State sources, they really weren't nervous throughout January. They felt pretty good about their positioning. And he ended up signing with them. And so, I don't know if he's as good as maybe his ranking was at certain points during this process. But this is a guy who finished as a top 100 player and at a position of need, in my opinion. And so I think they're pretty happy they landed with Amari Abor, even though there was some twists and turns along the way.
Wouldn't be recruiting if there weren't some twists and turns along the way, and there were plenty of twists and turns with Chris Mccullough as well. He was a guy they didn't end up getting, but it sure looked and sounded for all the world like they were going to get him at one point. So, that was, even by the standards of recruiting, that was a little bit of a weird one. So, can you share a little bit about his story?
Yeah, that was a weird one. I think his visit was maybe late June. And coming into the visit, you were like, this is a kid Ohio State likes. He speaks very highly of Ohio State. He went to the same high school as Josh Proctor, even though they were never in high school together. But, there was connections there, and he came for the visit, and I think Ohio State did really, really well on that visit. And after the visit, the kid basically told me, we could do a commitment interview, and I'm just filming a video, and then I'm going to be announcing. And sure, we could basically do a pre-announcement interview so that you can run it when I commit. And a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks. You're like, in today's day and age, you're kind of just like, yeah, these kids are making these videos and it takes long to edit, or they didn't shoot it right, or whatever it is. And then the commitment just never came. And I think Ohio State, while they understand that these things happen, kids are about to commit, they change their minds, they deal with that all the time. I think, without knowing too many of the specifics, what I do know is I don't think Ohio State really appreciated the way Chris and his, I guess I'll call it his camp, went about things. I think that they felt that it was just, there's maybe like a little bit of disrespect in the way that it kind of went down. And so if the kid just came to them and said, look, I thought I was going to make a decision, but maybe, I don't know, I'm getting cold feet. I want to take another look around. I want to take another round of visits. I think maybe they would have handled things, things could have maybe went a little bit differently. But basically, Ohio State, after that whole incident, kind of just stopped pursuing Chris. And it became an Oklahoma, the home state school, became the favorite. And then I think it was kind of the same thing. He was going to commit to Oklahoma, and he just wouldn't commit. And I don't think that they loved that. And so they moved on to other prospects. And then Florida was the school, and then they had a coaching change, and Chris McClellan was left scrambling. I mean, he was literally going to commit, I think, the day after or a couple days after Dan Mullen got fired, and he went back to Ohio State. He went back to Oklahoma and was basically begging in both of those classes, and they both said thanks but no thanks. And so he ended up committing to Florida, I think, before they even named a head coach, or maybe right after they named Napier. I can't remember the timing exactly, but I mean, that was really, not that he didn't have other options. He could have went to a lot of other places, but as far as the schools he wanted to go to, he was really only left with one of the three at the end of the day. And so that's kind of how that one ended up, which was, look, I think it will end up fine for the kid. Florida's a great place to be, but he could have had an opportunity to play for Larry Johnson, or Oklahoma had a coaching change too, but Brent Venables is obviously a defensive coach, so I think that's probably a good system to play, and he's done a pretty good job with defensive linemen at Clemson, I'd say.
Yeah, that was a weird one to see in real time, because you guys were kind of talking about, it might be coming soon, and it was like the way you guys were saying it was like they definitely know it's coming soon, and then it just never happened, and it was like, what is going on with this kid? And it never came. And yeah, those are the ones that I always look forward to. Okay, what's the real story after signing day? That's one of the good ones. At linebacker, the guys who they got, Gabe Powers and CJ Hicks, those were like about as straightforward as recruitment can get. So let's, instead of talking about them, we're going to talk about a couple of guys who they didn't sign. Let's start with Dasan McCullough. He was committed, and then he flipped to Indiana. And then in a wonderful modern 2022 recruiting twist, his recruitment took another turn after he signed. So let people know the story behind Dasan McCullough's recruitment.
Yeah, Dasan, it's interesting because early on, he very clearly wanted to be a Buckeye. He hadn't visited, but he loved everything about the program. He liked Al Washington. He was just his dad coached for Kevin Wilson at Indiana, and so he knew Kevin Wilson really well, and there was just a really good relationship there. But I think there was some mixed, before he even committed to Ohio State, I know there were some mixed opinions on him inside the Woody. And I remember reaching out to someone and asking, like, is he a take? Because he wants in, after speaking to him. And they were like, we got to talk about it. Because, like, I think people thought he was a tweener. He was a safety at the time. Is he a linebacker? Is he going to be too big for a linebacker? Is he maybe an edge guy? Is he too small for edge? Like, I think, in his mind, he was kind of what Sonny Styles is eventually maybe going to be for Ohio State, or what Isaiah Simmons was for Clemson. But I think there was just some questions about where he fit into the Ohio State defense inside the Woody Hayes. But they talked about it. They made the decision, yep, we're ready to take Dasan McCullough's commitment at this point in time. And so they did it. And, he was a great ambassador for Ohio State while he was committed. He was recruiting kids left and right. If CJ Hicks was Captain Buckeye, he was Iron Man to Captain America. He was Iron Buckeye, right? So he was right there with them, and it was interesting because his dad was the running backs coach of the Chiefs at the time, and then his dad left that job, the Chiefs job, after the Super Bowl, after they lost the Super Bowl to the Bucs, and he ended up taking a job at Indiana. And I remember reaching out to Dasan, And at first it was, the rumors of Al Washington going to Tennessee. And I think he was kind of like, if Coach Washington left, I'd still be a Buckeye, but, I'd want to see who they hire. And then his dad goes and he said, he maintained, I'm a Buckeye. My dad's my dad. I'm him. It's going to be fun to compete against each other. He's going to coach the running backs. I'm going to be chasing the running backs, all of that. But then Deshaun's older brother transferred from Miami, Ohio to Indiana. His younger brother committed to Indiana, who's a 2023 prospect. And I think Deshaun just felt like this would be a really cool opportunity to play with both of my brothers, with my dad coaching. And it's just something I can't pass up. And I don't think Ohio State was like cracked up over it. I think more than anything, maybe they're a little disappointed they weren't able to fill his spot eventually in the class with another linebacker, unless I guess maybe you count Sonny Styles there. But they weren't, they understood. It's hard for anyone how can anyone not understand wanting to do that? But as you mentioned, Tom, the irony is signing day has come and gone. Deshaun Mccullough, I think he enrolled early. His dad just took the running back's job at Notre Dame. If Brian Kelly doesn't go to LSU, that probably never happens, and it is what it is. But now Deshaun Mccullough and his older brother are at Indiana. His younger brother is committed to Indiana, but I would be maybe the older brother stays in Indiana. I mean, he was at Miami, Ohio. I think Indiana's probably a nice upgrade for him and probably somewhere he's comfortable being, but I wouldn't be shocked if Deshaun and the younger brother end up at Notre Dame at some point. I really wouldn't be shocked, but you never know. Maybe loves Indiana, has a chance to play early and just goes from there, but we'll see.
They always say commit to a program, not to a coach, commit to a school, not to a coach. That is perhaps the ultimate example of there are no exceptions to commit to a school, not to a coach, even if the coach is literally your dad. Recruiting 2022, you just can't beat it. You mentioned Sonny Styles a couple times there, so let's talk about Sonny Styles. Probably the biggest name in the defensive backfield class and probably the best story as well. This is a story we kind of touched on at the very end of yesterday's show with Mark Givler. Some people from Notre Dame thought he was destined to follow his brother Lorenzo Jr. to South Bend, and then he ended up committing and reclassifying very early to Ohio State. So what was the story there with Sonny Styles?
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid, his dad played for Ohio State, and, he grew up, his brother kind of was a kid who marched to the beat of his own drummer a little bit more than Sonny. I mean, Sonny was a Buckeye fan growing up. I mean, Lorenzo, I don't think had as much care or passion. Not that he didn't root for the Buckeyes, especially his dad played for them from Columbus, all that. Lorenzo was more of a case. I think he wanted to play wide receiver. Ohio State wanted him as a defensive back, and that really was kind of the deciding factor for Notre Dame over Ohio State there. But Sonny, obviously very comfortable with Notre Dame, but I think, he just always wanted to be a Buckeye, and he had a great relationship with Carrie Combs, great relationship with Al Washington. Ironically, neither are there. Started to build a bond with Matt Barnes, not there. But Larry Johnson and Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson, who recruits the Columbus area. I mean, he just had a really strong relationship. He felt really comfortable there. And I think in talking to Jim Knowles, once he got hired, he really loved Jim Knowles' ideas of how he's going to use him as kind of a defensive weapon in the system. So, I think push comes to shove. It was probably, I was told when he was a freshman that, it would be, if Ohio State offers him, he's going to be a Buckeye. He was that type of kid. So I kind of was always on the Ohio State train, seeing how he felt so comfortable going back to those camps last year so many times. I mean, you were there, Tom. You saw it. He was just going there to get work with the staff. I mean, I know what Notre Dame, I was talking to some Notre Dame people, and they were always confident. They were also confident in Luke Montgomery too. And, the only one that I really feel like they were right on that I was wrong on was Brennan Vernon maybe. But clearly, it was just a matter of, Sonny wasn't just going to follow his brother. He definitely was making his own decision, and he's a little bit different than his brother. And I think he had the opportunity, you saw what Quinn Ewers did last year. He was kind of really the first, and there's been a couple others that have done this whole reclassing thing. Gavin Wimsatt at Rutgers. You see LJ Overton, who was supposed to be 2023 class, now coming to 2022. Sonny Styles, he had the opportunity to reclass up, get to Ohio State, get in the weight room this June, learn the system. I mean, even if he's not a mega impact player, he's getting basically a 4-month head start on his career and his development as a football player. So even if he redshirts this year, he's in a much better place Jan 1 or Jan 10th of 2023, having been there for 4 months, than he would have been coming in right out of high school. So I think it was, once he was able to do it, it was kind of a no-brainer. He's not a kid who you expect to stay, redshirt and then play 4 years anyway. He's probably a 3-and-out type of talent. So if you get the 4 years from him, because this year kind of counts as one of those 4, you're going to be thrilled. So that was really just an interesting story, kind of the way it came together, because Ohio State really, I don't know if he's going to be a safety, a linebacker, a hybrid, whatever he's going to be, but they could really use whatever he is on the defensive side of the ball. So that was big for him. That was big for Ohio State. And, again, Notre Dame, I think, was a strong option. It was definitely Ohio State or Notre Dame, but I don't think it was really much of a question in his mind. It was Ohio State for a pretty long while, even before he made the commitment. And
let's just real quickly set some expectations for Sonny Styles this fall. I've seen people say, well, maybe he's going to come in and start. It's like, no, turn the dial down like about 4 settings. He's here a year early. Let's see. Maybe he contributes on special teams. Maybe he get some second team reps at some point. But he is not going to be a day one starter. It's okay. That does not mean he's a bust. It means he should still be in high school. So be a little patient, and we'll talk to you in 2023. And anything that happens before 2023 is just a bonus. So 2 more guys wanted to discuss. Both very interesting stories in very different ways. One was a flip, Terrance Brooks. It seems like they lose a defensive back right before signing day just about every year for some reason. So what happened with Terrance Brooks?
Yeah, I mean, this one, the commitment came out of nowhere because everyone thought he was going to Alabama, maybe Texas A&M, where his dad played. He visited Ohio. Ohio State offered late. They got a visit late in June. When a decision date was kind of already set, and then or decision timetable was already set, and he was just blown away, absolutely blown away on his visit. Carrie Combs was a big part of it, but he wasn't the only part of it, and Terrance committed to Ohio State. And then from late June through December 14th or something like that, signing day was the 15th, there was, let's call it maybe till the beginning of December, right after Thanksgiving, there was not a peep, not a concern, not a blip on the radar of this kid flipping. And then in-home visits open up, and all of a sudden we start to find out Texas has gone in-home with Terrance Brooks. Not once, but twice. And I remember the first time I reached out to Ohio State, I was like, are you guys concerned? And they said, I said, or is Brooks solid? And someone close to the program told me, if he was solid, would he even let Texas in his house? Mm-hmm. And I said, that's a good point. Probably not. So, obviously there was concern for Ohio State, but, they talked to Terrance, they talked to his dad, and they were ultimately assured that, look, there's nothing really to worry about. I had the privilege of being at a National Signing Day event down in Texas, where 25 of the country's best players were signing their letters of intent, and Terrance was one of those 25. So I was fortunate to kind of be on the ground and hearing the buzz and what was going on, and I found out that morning that he was going to Texas. And I remember, let's just say Ohio State was not aware of this. So they were in shock. I think that they were not in shock. Obviously, you couldn't be in complete shock. We knew it was a possibility, but I think they kind of thought they weathered the storm. And it was definitely surprising, especially because of what the Brooks family was telling them in the days leading up to actually signing the letter of intent. And so that was a disappointing one for Ohio State, because they couldn't even fill his place in the class that late in the game. And the Brooks family told me, like, after the event, after the announcement was made and things like that, Terrance kind of played it's nice to stay closer to home, but his dad kind of told me basically they were unsure about Carrie Combs and his future and the defensive staff at Ohio State. There was too much uncertainty, but I know that people on the Ohio State side of things and some people down on the ground in Texas where I was felt that NIL definitely played a little bit of a role in Texas surging late. So, look, the kid he's from the Dallas area. It's not that far to go to Austin, so I can't blame him for wanting to stay home, especially if there's an opportunity to make a lot of money in NIL. But seems like the way he went about it wasn't necessarily the most respectful way either.
Yeah, that feels like that's going to be kind of a theme in maybe next year's and the year after that when we're doing this segment. Hey, he got a car wash out of this or whatever it is. Like it seems like that's developing very quickly, and the arms race there is kind of heating up as it goes along. It wasn't NIL working against Ohio State in this next one, but there may have been another factor that was working against Ohio State in the recruitment of five-star corner Will Johnson. He is a Michigan legacy. There's a little hint as to what might have been working against them. He ended up with the Wolverines, but there were some twists and turns along the way, and there was a moment where I was like, wait, he's not going to come to Ohio State, is he? What happened there between point A and point B?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's a Detroit kid, and his dad played for Michigan. So, from the jump, you're like, oh, this kid's probably going to go to Michigan. But Carrie Combs was great recruiting the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. I remember his first stint with Ohio State. He kind of put that flag in he planted those flags, and he was proud of what he was able to do in Michigan. So he gave them a shot. Will Johnson had a great relationship with Carrie. I think where the door opened for Ohio State, I think they got rid of their DB coach somehow. I forget what happened. And then they brought in Mo Linguist, and then Mo took the head coaching job at Buffalo. And so there was a lot of uncertainty around who the DB coach was going to be, if I'm remembering correctly, the timeline. But all I know is that there was like a lot of smoke about Will in Ohio State, and it was really stemming from a lot of the Ohio State commits at the time. And I talked to a few of them, and I mean, they were in group texts with him and all that, and they were adamant. I mean, Will was talking about, I want to come to Ohio State. I'm going to be a Buckeye. I'm planning my commitment, this and that. I remember he went on a visit. It might have been a self-guided tour at the time. I don't remember if they could do it or not, but they loved what they saw at Ohio State, and it really looked like it was going to be Ohio State. I think there was even confidence inside the Woody. But then, Michigan hired Steve Clinkscales, and, they hit it off, and ultimately, I still think, from what I know at that point, if the decision was just Will's and Will's alone, it still might have been Ohio State. But I know his dad was a heavy, heavy influence in this recruitment. And look, he played for Michigan. I think he played with Jim Harbaugh, or right after maybe. But there's familiarity there. There's obviously relationships and things like that. And I just think think about it the other way around. I mean, you talk. I mean, Chris Spielman's dad, maybe didn't play for Ohio State, but you always hear the story about how he wouldn't have let Chris go to Michigan, right? So, just as an Ohio State fan would expect, think about Lorenzo Styles' dad, right, or Sonny Styles' dad. Imagine if he wanted to go to Michigan. I mean, maybe he would let him. He let one son go to Notre Dame, but you would be mad at Lorenzo Styles Sr. for letting Sonny Styles go to Michigan, right? So, I think just as that's the case, I understand Deion Johnson probably kind of pushing his son very strongly toward Michigan, and ultimately that's what happened, and he stuck with that the whole time. I actually had heard it, if he wasn't going to go to Michigan, I think the compromise school would have been USC. Obviously, Clay Helton and the staff there getting fired probably nixed that idea, but it's just interesting. I think that the kid seemed to at one point really, really want to go to Ohio State, but strong influence, and understandably so. His dad definitely steered the ship toward Ann Arbor.
Yeah, and that ended up kind of where you thought it would be, but it was a little bit of an interesting journey between the start and the finish there. So glad you were able to kind of decode all of that stuff for us. And as I said earlier, We've talked about a bunch of guys, and it's like maybe a third, maybe even a quarter of what Alex did in terms of reporting for this story. This is a super, super in-depth story. I'll have a link to it in the post for this on the front page at BuckeyeScoop.com. But you also, this week, recorded a new episode of Around the Oval. You talked about recording commitment episodes of a podcast with Chris Mccullough potentially. You got to actually run this one with Luke Montgomery. So let people know where they can find that and what you talked to Luke about.
Yeah, I mean, you could go to our YouTube channels, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, any podcast platform, and listen to that podcast and watch the video on YouTube, or there's an article on our site where kind of quote for those people who don't like podcasts or don't like to watch videos, you could read many of the quotes in there. But yeah, it was a great conversation. I mean, he's a great kid, and we just talked about why he picked Ohio State when he came to that decision, the coaching change, because he was close. I know Stud gets a rap for not being a great recruiter, but this one is one where he had a really good relationship. But we talked about that change when Stud got replaced by Justin Fry, and a really neat story about how prepared Justin Fry came to his first meeting with Luke Montgomery just days after arriving in Columbus. We talked about what position he's going to play because there's some questions around that. We talked about his brother, who's a 2025 quarterback recruit who Ohio State has already offered, and also touched on a number of guys he's going to be helping to recruit in the class. So I thought it was not to toot my own horn, any of us could have done it. I think the subject more than me, like Luke was just really great about, speaking about everything, and he went really thorough. Sometimes you interview these kids and they give you these one-word answers or they don't really give you much to go off, but Luke is a really mature kid. He was really engaged, and it's definitely worth a listen or a watch.
Well, make sure you check that out. It is the Around the Oval podcast. You can find that. Just search Around the Oval wherever you're listening to this, or search Buckeye Scoop. That'll get you all of our great podcasts. The Big Meat Kickoff podcast with Kevin Noon, the Big Gives the Bank podcast with Bill the Bank Green and Mark Gifler, and Buckeye Weekly with Tony Gerderman and myself. You can find those wherever you find this. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. And as Alex mentioned, we do put these on YouTube as well. So if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. That will help other folks find these shows. It's something we do genuinely appreciate, and it only takes a second on your part. And if you want to make your life a little easier, you can also hit that bell on YouTube. That'll subscribe you to our channel, get you notified every time we post a new interview. This week with the Luke Montgomery thing, we had a live stream of the interview, of the announcement itself. We had Alex's Around the Oval podcast about it. I had Mark Gifler on the Morning Scoop yesterday to talk about the impact of the Luke Montgomery commitment from the Ohio State perspective. Lots of content. It's February, and we are drowning you in content. So you're welcome, and it's all at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.